I got this Mini Jeep Gladiator a little while back, and I've already built the frame for it, and mounted a motor, and most of a drivetrain in it. In this video, I'm going to get the rear axle and suspension built for it. Alright, so the basic rear axle structure is tacked together and very, very delicately sitting on top of where it's going to go. These holes here on either side that are still remaining, those are going to be for the bottom of the radius arms, and the radius arms are going to come up, and they're going to have a bracket up here on the frame. So we need to build a boxed-in bracket up here, we need to box those holes in, and we need to put some gusset material over in this area to keep this strong, keep it from bending. That'll locate the axle in the front to back direction. Let's do it. Alright, so the radius arms are all tacked in there. The axle is now located front to back. Needs some spacers and tightening up, granted, but it's in there. As you can see, this is maybe full droop, something along those lines, and if you bring this jack down, we come all the way down until we sit on these bump stops. The axle here, the top of that being parallel to the frame rails, so it sits flat together right there. And I know what you're probably thinking, you can't use all hind joints for radius arms, because that's just going to bind up. I know. I'm doing that intentionally, to keep the chain from twisting too much while the suspension flexes. Trying to limit that flex massively. And yeah, when we lift the tire right here, you can see I can only get the tire about 2 inches off the ground over here before it picks the whole frame up and starts to bind up. That's exactly what I want. And when you move the axle side to side, it has zero binding. Unlike most radius arms, this axle will be able to travel up and down the entire panhard bar arc without any binding whatsoever, or at least very little, because the hind joints allow it to move side by side very freely. So, next thing we got to do is set this thing to approximate ride height, which looks like it pretty much is right at this moment, and then get that panhard bar and brackets in there. I do also want to mention that I'm well aware that pie cuts are not a good idea on structural or load-bearing tube of really any sort, but I'm just doing the best I can with the tools I have right now, and I'm definitely going to gusset the arms in the future videos along the axes at which they'll be most likely to break. Alrighty, so the panhard bar is all roughed in here. I did have to move this lower bracket in and shorten this rod just a little bit, but it worked out. Still should have enough travel. As you can see, we're at about ride height right now. Everything's a little loose and jiggly here because there's no spacers, but drop it all the way down to where it lands on below where the bump stops are going to stop it. And if I crank this all the way back up to about full droop, probably where full droop's going to be, right about there. Nice and snug, has a good path of travel, all that stuff, shouldn't interfere with anything. Next, let's put the coilovers on there so we have something to suspend this suspension. Alright, so we got the coilovers all the way in there now, tacked in. And yes, I know it's going to put a lot of extra weird side load on the radius arms that they wouldn't normally have, but I deemed after much consideration that this is the place where the coilovers had to be to effectively get the right spring rate through mechanical advantage and for packaging so they didn't run into other things. I did adjust the overall height and the preload of the coilovers as you saw to get them to where they're at now. You can see it supports me pretty well. And I'm all the way on the back bumper with my weight right now. So the next things we have to do are put a chain in there and get the axle all centered up and locked down so that we can see when the suspension travels, how does the chain do on the sprockets, how much does it twist side to side, how much does it bind up, and does it at all. And we need to get a seat on here so I can put my weight where it's actually going to go, and we'll see how it sits then. Alrighty, well you can see the seats fully mounted up in here. I fit pretty well in here. It rides really nice. I'm really happy with the spring weight and the shocks that we've got here. So we'll see how it is with somebody a lot heavier, but for me this is going to work really, really well. In the next episode, we're going to do the front suspension and steering, and boy will that be interesting packaging wise if you've seen how the motor is mounted in this thing. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for watching.